Welcome back to this, already the final segment of today's Price of Business. I'm your host, Kevin Price, talking to you about you and your business. Delighted to spend time with my good friend Steve Parkhurst and his website, AmRen Consulting, amrenconsulting.com. And Steve, I asked you a question just before the break. Who do you think is going to be the next to get out of the six?
Well, you kind of alluded to it a minute ago, and I'll throw two at you because I think it could go either way at this point. I'd say Governor Gilmore of Virginia, or Ben
God, he's
Carson.
still in it. That means there's more than six.
yeah, exactly. It's hard to determine whether there's six serious candidates or six total candidates. But yeah, Gilmore is still in it, and he got 11 votes in Iowa, and for some reason he thought he was going to do better than that over in New Hampshire. So. But I'd say one of those two guys is the next to go. Yeah.
Well, if I had factored Gilmore in, I would have probably put him first and then Carson. Gilmore's gotten zero traction. He's a great guy, by the way. He's been on our show several times on the Price of Business show. In fact, he came very close to announcing right here on this program that he was going to run. And so I personally like him. I think he's a little bit of kind of a disconnect from what's actually happening today a little bit. But, boy, he has a phenomenal resume. That guy is certainly high office worthy when you look at him. And but that's interesting take. So who do you think the final two are going to be at the end? How's that for testing you?
Well, I right now I would say Trump and Rubio will be the final two.
Wow, you are optimistic.
Yeah, yeah. I just think that as you get to these different states, you're going to have Nevada that's going to follow up South Carolina here shortly. And Rubio is going to carry Nevada. He's got a strong following from there. He actually spent part of his life living there when he was young, and I think that's going to kind of reset the balance a little bit. And I can just see. I think Trump's just going to have the support base that's never going to waver. I think he's going to have obviously the money if he needs it. Seems like he's not even spending much money, but if he does need money, he's going to have it. I just think ultimately Rubio is a more likable figure and just a more electable figure, somebody who can relate more to the common man, as opposed to the Ted Cruz kind of the preachy approach that he's got to things, and just kind of that little bit of I don't even know what to call it anymore. Just that real, it's not folksy. He's not folksy about what he does. He just gets
he's self-righteous. He's self-righteous is what he comes across as.
Yeah, you're right.
That's the term I keep hearing people use, and I think that resonates. And so he's almost a total shockback to like the 50s almost. And correct. I'm not sure if he could have got elected then. They voted for Mr. Amiable Dwight Eisenhower, who was anything but preachy back then. But he kind of comes across like that. And but let me tell you, ground game matters. You more than most people understand that. You've got people elected on total shoestring budgets where people are outspending your opponent, your candidate by 10-1, and you still figured out how to win. He's got incredible ground game, and frankly, much more of a ground game than what Marco Rubio has.
Yeah, I think it's somewhat debatable on that. I visibly, you'd have to say yes on that's true. Rubio did a lot of. He had a PAC that was supporting and endorsing candidates in the 2012 election cycle and same in 2014. So I think he's at least got the list, and he's got the people that he can reach out to, and he's got a lot of momentum at these rallies and things that he does, and he's got a lot of young people, and that's what really matters. There's a lot being said about who's got supporters, and when you've got the young people on your side, as you and I discussed a couple weeks ago with Rand Paul, I mean, it's a matter of getting them to the polls, but as far as your worker bees, I mean, it's a lot of times it's younger people, and Rubio's got a lot of those on his side, so. He may not have a visible ground game that we can all, sit back and identify. But I know, he's got a Texas team. They've got a strong Texas representation right now, and they have now for several months. So, and I mean, that's just one thing. I'm just talking about what I see on a daily basis. So I think he'll be ready for the long haul ultimately.
Yep. Well, it'll be interesting to see. I think it's going to be an interesting contest. I personally think that over time, Donald Trump gets eliminated. I really do. I think I think I think about him on Super Tuesday. How is a guy like him and Ted Cruz nailed it? The New York personality, the New York culture. Donald Trump's going to have a very difficult time in the South. He continues to make sophomore mistakes that are beyond even his Teflon, like not showing up, for that debate, that last debate in Iowa, which, frankly made him look like a coward. He likes to throw that name, the P word at Cruz. He ends up looking like a coward, in the process. He's going to continue to make profound sophomore mistakes. He's not going to get the South. I actually think it becomes Cruz and Rubio's rising the South becomes my opinion. And but unfortunately, what I think is going to happen is that Trump is going to declare sour grapes and find himself running independently. I kind of abide by that theory.
Well, that's a real apocalypse theory, Kevin. You got me a little bit down now. And certainly I can see all that. I think, I don't know if it was in the Wall Street Journal today, but there's an article about the possibility of, Michael Bloomberg forming making a third party run. So, these guys with money, these self-independent, self-wealth guys, they seem to think they can run the country better than anybody else. And I can certainly see your scenario playing out. Trump, you're right. He admitted within days, and in fact, it might have been the next day, that missing that Iowa debate really cost him. And the irony of that missing that debate was so bizarre because, he goes around and talking about how great the military is going to be if he were president and how tough he's going to be on everybody. And so he's going to stand up to Putin and he's going to stand up to Iran. And yet he wouldn't let a blonde woman ask him questions on Fox News. I mean, it's just a little bit too weird. And so you're right. I could see Rubio and Cruz being the two finalists. But like I said, I kind of just think that Trump. I just think Trump's got this base right now that's just not wavering. They just don't go anywhere. They don't leave him. And, again, a couple slip-ups could hurt him. And he's also, I think he started to degrade kind of the office he's running for at this point. The comments against Ted Cruz the other day, like you alluded to the P word, just dumb. And that's just one of those things. It's an unforced error. And I just, again, that's something that the Trumpkins, they love it. That's what they want to hear. They're anti everything right now, and they just want somebody to get in there and shake up things and be different and not do business with anybody. But it's still just petty and stupid to say stuff like that when you're running for president of the United States.
Yeah, actually, the real consistent coward is proving to be Donald Trump. He won't go and be, face a woman. He won't take on Ted Cruz one-on-one, which, by the way, I was salivating over that opportunity. I was so hoping, because he would have been utterly destroyed by Ted Cruz. Would have been utterly destroyed, I believe, by Ted Cruz. I really believe there's only room for one Darth Vader type candidate. There can't be both. And Cruz and Trump, I think I kind of like that. I mean, they're both walking negatives. And I knew at some point they would be clashing big time because they have similar styles in terms of messaging. Obviously, one much more sophisticated and certainly more consistent than the other. But nonetheless, they'd be clashing. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I tend to agree. And your analogy of the Darth Vader, the final one, that's spot on, and that's a good way to look at it. And you're right. There's only room in the race ultimately for one guy like that, and you can't have both be the final two guys.
Yep, no question about it. Talk a little bit about, we only have a few minutes left. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about your book project. We're both, I knew Jack Kemp. He was one of my political heroes for years. I don't think he would survive very well politically in our culture today. He believed in people too much, which, I'm not sure if you can do that in our political culture today. But you've got a great project. Jack Kemp served in Congress with distinction, former NFL great as well, and outstanding public servants. Talk a little bit about the Jack Kemp story.
Yeah, well, Jack Kemp was a guy who spent a lifetime. He played football, left football to get into politics eventually, and he just spent a lifetime uplifting people, trying to empower people, trying to bring out the best in people, and ultimately tried to lead as many people towards the possibility of achieving the American dream as possible. And it was just it was very different for the most part from most of what we see today. Now, there's some really good politicians and office holders, and just federally, there's guys like Senator Tim Scott from South Carolina, and I actually throw Senator Marco Rubio into the category, and then of course there's Speaker Paul Ryan, guys who just they look at economic growth as a way to just empower as many people as possible and to lift people out of poverty and to throw in education choice and ideas like enterprise zones and even Rand Paul had a version of enterprise zones, so you could kind of throw him into this category of people who just view local people and just local organizations, communities coming together as the answer, as opposed to big government or more federal dollars. And again, this is just something Jack Kemp spent a lifetime doing it. He was in Congress for 18 years, and then of course led a think tank called Empower America. Ran for vice president in 1996, which was kind of a lackluster effort. Even ultimately, he would admit that. But he was just a guy that we really could look back to now and look at his economic policies. And while you can't duplicate the policies, word for word, policy for policy of Reaganomics, which was actually Kemponomics, if you really go back and look at it, that type of mentality and that type of economic growth is something we could definitely use today. And we've got record numbers of people not in the workforce, and there's a lot of money sitting on the sidelines that if we could free up that capital, we could put a whole lot of people, just a ton of people back to work. And then at that point, you have a lot more people paying into the system and being citizens, and you don't have the government having to carry the burden as much.
Yeah, and I would even go further and say Coolidge-nomics. Calvin Coolidge, did the same proposals back in the 1920s, and this was not new. This idea wasn't new. John F. Kennedy, a rising tide lifts all boats, and so there's a lot of work out there. Mainly articles, but there's another book on Kemp that recently came out. You reviewed it. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so it was really the first biography. Everything that had been written to that point about Jack Kemp was stuff that he had written himself as far as books go. So this was the first biography, and it was written by Mort Kondracki and Fred Barnes, and they looked at Kemp's, basically they really looked at his political career. They touched a little bit on football and growing up and stuff like that, but they really focused on his political career. And, it was interesting as a Jack Kemp, I don't know if I'd say a fan or aficionado or what the right word would be at this point, maybe just a Jack Kemp researcher. There wasn't a lot new that I learned. One part of the book, though, where they kind of got bogged down a bit was there were a couple of votes, or a couple of policies throughout the 80s, mainly during the Reagan years, where these guys, they really got into the nitty-gritty of who voted for what and who voted for what amendment to what bill, and then the stalling tactics and just the overall policy minutia that, it kind of goes back to that saying about, when people say, well, I don't care how the sausage is made, I just want the sausage. That was kind of what this book was like. It was just like there were so many details, and it was so detailed that I'm just not sure that people really care for that ultimately. But overall, I mean, like I said, I didn't learn much new because I've just been at this for a long time. But I think it was a really good product for people who maybe had forgotten about Kemp. He passed away in 2009, and we're actually coming up on 7 years in May that he's been gone. So it's it was a good reminder, but it was also, I thought the release of it was pretty well timed in the sense that at the time you had still 12, 14 presidential candidates on the Republican side who all really need to understand Kempian policy, Kempian economics, Kempian outreach, all of it, because ultimately you can't, and the authors make the point, I think in subsequent interviews, not necessarily in the book, but they've made as they did the book tour afterwards, they made the point that Kemp would not have been a fan of a Donald Trump, because Donald Trump is more about burning the house down than he is about running in and trying to save the people while the house is burning. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's truth to that. There's no question about it. Kemp really believed in people in a way that things could be accomplished with working as a team. I think the whole team analogy played a big role in how Kemp approached politics. He believed in teams and working together, even if people were different and that type of thing. He ultimately believed that both sides of the aisle, be it Republican or Democrat, were on the same team, America's team. I'm not sure if that's true anymore. But, which is why I wonder how he would function in our world today. But I really do wish you well on that book. I'm excited for you on that. Give your website one more time as we wrap up the segment.
Sure. It's Amaran Consulting. Again, it's short for American Renaissance, so just amaranconsulting.com.
Yep. Very good. When we come back tomorrow, we're going to have much, much more for you. I hope you have a great rest of your weekend. Spend it right here on this station.